Earlier today, I sat down for a quick conversation with Congresswoman Sara Jacobs while she was very much on the move. She represents California's 51st District in Congress and sits on the House Foreign Affairs Committee. We talked about a wide range of issues from why she will not be attending tonight's State of the Union to the evolving situation regarding Iran and the partial government shutdown over DHS and ICE reforms. I want to thank the Congresswoman again for taking some time out of her busy schedule to chat with me, and I hope you enjoy our conversation. Today is the State of the Union address. I know you've already said you won't be attending, and I'm just wondering what message are you trying to send by choosing to protest tonight's State of the Union?
Look, I'm not going because I know that the best way to stand up to a narcissist is to not give them the attention that they want. And I don't need Donald Trump to lie to me and try and gaslight me. I and the American people know what the real state of the union is. The real state of the union is that no one can afford groceries, that housing is going up, costs are going up, and that he's starting wars all over the place.
We can all pretty much expect to hear a lot of lies tonight during the address. And what do you think the best way for both our Democratic representatives, but also just normal people who are in conversations to combat those lies?
I think the best is to tell the real stories of what the American people are going through, right? We know what we are experiencing, and what we are experiencing is not what Donald Trump is going to say tonight. Everything is not great. He is not making things better. And the more we can highlight that, the real human stories about how we are actually experiencing the Trump era, I think that's how we combat the lies, not with statistics, but with real human stories.
So the other big news that we can expect probably not to be featured too heavily is we are in the middle of a partial government shutdown over ICE funding and reforms. And yesterday, Congress heard testimony from a former ICE Academy instructor who called ICE's training programs deficient, defective, and broken, and saying that he received secretive orders to teach new cadets to violate the Constitution by entering homes without a judicial warrant. What did you think of his testimony? And does his testimony changed Democratic negotiating position in the shutdown?
I don't think it changes our position at all because we already knew that these new hires were not getting trained enough. And we put forward some very reasonable, basic protections. Frankly, I don't even think what we put forward is enough, but they are the very least that they can do. And they're not even willing to do that. They're literally willing to punish TSA workers and try and close global entry instead of just putting very, very basic low level restraints on ICE and Border Patrol not wearing masks and needing judicial warrants to go into people's homes.
And on that, have you heard, or I know you guys have been on break, any additional negotiations that are happening? Is there any movement towards getting closer to those reforms?
It seems like negotiations are stalled. Again, the White House seems unwilling to even engage on these very bare minimum reforms that we're asking for.
Disappointing, to say the least. And then some other big news I know you're watching really closely is that the president is considering some sort of strike on Tehran to force them into a nuclear deal. And I know that there is the Iranian War Powers Resolution by Rokana and Thomas Massey that is expected to come to the floor. But I've seen some reporting that maybe suggests it's DOA. And I'm just wondering what you're hearing and how you're seeing that move forward.
Look, I'll be honest. I think that there are people in both parties who are very open to a strike on Iran. And I think that's very unfortunate because it's not even like that we've seen this movie before in other countries. We've literally seen this movie before in Iran, and the US trying to do a regime change is literally part of what led us to where we are today. We are very bad at regime change. We are not good at anticipating what comes after, not to mention that it causes mass destabilization in a country as big as Iran. That would be really problematic. And we're talking about this huge military buildup, this potential huge strikes, all for a deal that's worse than the deal we already had that Donald Trump pulled us out of.
And as far as I understand, the War Powers Resolution is just to have some congressional oversight, which is in the Constitution. And so I'm wondering why you think, or what your view is on some of the colleagues who seem so willing to give up that congressional power given to Congress even before a debate.
So, yes. The Constitution gives Congress the power to declare war, not the president. And for a very long time, presidents, frankly, from both parties, have usurped that power, and Congress, frankly, has let them, in part because my colleagues don't want to have to make these difficult decisions. But the president does not have congressional authority to strike Iran, period, full stop. And he needs that to be able to get anything done. And that's why the War Powers Resolution is so important because it shows he does not have congressional authority to strike Iran.
Definitely. All right. Just to switch gears a little bit, I know you already at the top talked about where we're at with the economy. Everyone is really feeling it. Average day Americans are really struggling to afford costs. At the end of last week, we saw the Supreme Court strike down the tariffs under IEEPA. And then pretty much immediately after, the president announced an additional global tariff under Section 122. What did you think when you heard of the SCOTUS's ruling and when Trump announced the new set of tariffs?
Look, I was very glad when I heard SCOTUS's ruling because we've been saying all along that his tariffs are illegal. And I think it goes to show that even this Supreme Court is unwilling to just rubber stamp Donald Trump's agenda. We know tariffs hurt American consumers, American businesses. And after throwing his tantrum, he's now trying to use another law to try and get around the fact that only Congress can levy taxes, which is what a tariff is. And frankly, unfortunate. I know the lawyers who brought the suit on IEPA are working on bringing suit on this case as well. And I think they'll be successful as well because the Constitution is very clear. Only Congress can levy taxes, and tariffs are a tax.
And so under Section 122, it should be triggering a vote in Congress in 150 days if one hasn't come up before then. Do you think Democrats will be unified on opposing these broad tariffs?
Absolutely, yes.
Yesterday, Judge Eileen Cannon permanently blocked the release of Jack Smith's classified documents reports. What did you think of that ruling, and do you think the American people have a right to that information?
I think transparency is the most important thing that we need right now. And making sure that the American people understand what's happening, whether it's the Epstein files or the classified documents report, it's really, really important. And so I'm hopeful that as the appeals process goes through, that the American people will get to see these reports because I think transparency is the most important thing right now.
Absolutely. And I know we're running short on time, but just kind of lastly here, we're 8 months out from the midterms. The president's approval rating is nearing second term low. And really, the economy is, I think, the big story on a lot of Americans' minds. So, what is your message on what the Democrats can really do to help the American people as we approach the midterms?
Look, Donald Trump is going to spend tonight lying to you and telling you that what you're experiencing isn't real. But we know that it's real. And Democrats understand that the cost of living is too high, things are too expensive. And we have a real plan on how we're going to bring down the cost of living for the American people.